Psychology is all around us. Psychological elements can be seen throughout the lifespan, from birth until death. Films are a wonderful tool to explain psychological theory and occurrences in our lives. Characters interact within each frame of film psychological concepts. The films we remember most and view multiple times engage us by capturing the presence of these psychological dynamics in an authentic way.
Please join me today, Dr. Katherine Marshall Woods, media psychologist and film consultant, and my guest today, Gabriel Noble, with his short film, A Cup of Tea, on the best psychology in film. Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Katherine Marshall Woods, your host today, and welcome to Best Psychology in Film. Today, we have the wonderful privilege of speaking to Gabriel Noble regarding his film, A Cup of Tea. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Why don't you tell us about this great, very unique short?
Yeah, so A Cup of Tea is a short film, a drama about the after effects and fallout of a murder of a young Black man in the hands of the police. And we capture a little bit of the incident. We don't show like the murder itself, but we show like the traffic stop, them in a car. Jamal is a character that is murdered, and he's with a friend, and they're not breaking the law. They're just sitting in their car, and their day is ruined, essentially, and a life is taken away. And so then we flash forward 3 years later. The parents, Shannon and Coleman, have since split up. The effects of the murder and all the drama that ensued caused them to part ways, and they each had their own demons. But we fast forward to a very special day 3 years later, and Coleman surprises her at her stoop in Harlem. We shot in Harlem last summer, and she reluctantly invites him inside, and they have a cup of tea. And through this, it's a heavy dialogue film. So they have a conversation at a table, share tea, and it starts as light, but there's an underlying tension throughout. And so they approach the hard issues of grief, of being a Black parent, the differences of being a mother and father, and what happens after such a tragedy. And we get to kind of marinate in that with them and be a fly on the wall during this really intense conversation.
Thank you so much for that description. Why don't we allow our audiences to get a small clip of the film, and we'll be right back.
Yeah, come on. There you go, there you go. Look, weak ass laws. Give my shit back. So throw. Okay.
We see within this film these two individuals who are, as you navigated and through this film, that they both have their demons, right? And that they have experienced the loss of their son. I'm wondering what made you desire to have a film regarding loss and grief and these kind of challenging conversations that are had between partners or former partners.
Yeah. Well, my first inspiration was I wrote this fall of 2022, and I feel like that was still a little bit of the pandemic happening. And we all know what happened during the pandemic. It's the George Floyd, Breonna Taylor murders, and the ensuing protests. And so, I feel like there was enough gap of time there for me and for all of us to really reflect on things. But my mind just kept jumping to the parents. And at the time, I was taking my screenwriting class that I really wanted to like finally jump into film, and we had to write a project, and I kept coming back to this issue. And I just remember thinking about the parents and what happens to them afterwards, because we always see them in the media, and there always have to be like these strong figures, because not only do they have to stay strong for their family and themselves, but also for the American public and for the people out in the streets trying to make change with our government officials and everything. So I was like, what happens behind closed doors at home? What happens after the fallout? What happens after the verdict, after the settlements? So that was like a main point of interest for me. And I just try to dive into a lot of like news articles and stories about the parents. But also I wanted to focus on grief because we were all like suffering a lot of grief during that time, during the pandemic and during the protests. And I think we all started to become more familiar with what it's like to lose someone, even if you weren't directly affected, you saw it all around us. And for me, it was a way to kind of navigate that and dive into the minds of both of these parents and really explore this concept of no one's at fault. Like they're innocent individuals that unfortunately this tragedy happened to. And I think the easy thing is to blame each other. But I wanted to explore that and show that the blame isn't within this household, it's elsewhere with the police.
I think the reason why A Cup of Tea was evocative to me was because your film, unlike a number of films that are addressing police violence against citizens, is that you were thoughtful regarding what happens after.
Mhm.
Many filmmakers and many individuals really are very consumed with seeing what is happening in the moment. I mean, we even have body cam footage to be able to watch like what's happening in the moment a number of times, and it's true footage per se. Um, but you actually had the curiosity regarding what happens after. Can you share a little bit about why that was a curiosity for you, considering, a lot of individuals are like, the case is over, it's closed. This gives the family an opportunity to grieve, to be able to find closure in whatever ways that they can. This is a time to end the curiosity, but you
Yeah.
seem to find the curiosity there.
Yeah, because I feel like in the media and in other films that kind of tackle grief and murder, it's like, like you might get a glimpse of their inner life and their personal lives outside of the media, but you never really see the real struggle and how their demons come out to the surface. And you hear a lot about families who lose a child, even if it's not police brutality, they fall apart. It destroys their lives and everything. So it made me just really curious and think about, well, not only did a murder happen, they lost their child, but also they have to be the face of a movement, a face of something that's been going on forever and making a change for it and giving speeches in front of the public and having to keep like that strong persona. But inside they're grieving. And then they have to kind of take that with them, even if they do win a court case or anything and get like a great settlement. It's like they still lost their child, like we see all these other families that have lost a child like outside of police brutality, and it takes years, decades. It's with them for their entire lives. And so I think we should honor the parents of these crimes the same way and recognize the fact that this pain and this grief is going to be with them like for a long time.
There's an article that came to mind when I was watching your film. It is called Common Grief, Complex Grieving by Anderson, published in 2010 in Pastoral Psychology. The reason why this came about is because there is also another film called Manchester by the Sea, which was an Oscar-nominated film, etc., and it talks about grief and thinks about grief of parents in particular. But this article I thought was really astute in being able to think about your characters as well. Specifically, Anderson says when grief occurs, family members need to intend to be together so their grief can be shared. In
Mm.
order for the relationship to continue to be a fruitful relationship, they have to share within the grieving process. And I'm wondering for Coleman and Shannon, where that process was for them sharing in their grief.
Yeah, I think, I developed pretty strong backstories for both of these characters to just make their actions and their fallout much more realistic. So I feel like, they definitely grieve together, or they try to. But again, like coming back to the whole being in the spotlight, being in the media attention, I can only imagine that just weighs on people because they have to like be inside their homes and grieving the way like authentically and who they want to how they want to grieve. But then as soon as they step out in front of cameras and they're in front of microphones, they have to put on a different kind of persona. And so for me, the thought was always that the pressure of all that just made it so much harder to grieve together in behind closed doors in their own home because, you know, they feel that pressure. And, you know, with Coleman, his demons come out and he's has a drinking problem. And Shannon, she mostly just wants to grieve on her own. She wants to like be home. She doesn't want to be in front of the media. She doesn't think that it's going to like solve anything or bring her boy back. And so for me, there was that grieving together as a family, but the pressure of it all with this added layer of it being like a countrywide movement and things like that just really broke them at the seams. And I think that's what I was trying to explore with this.
Yes, I think that your film does a wonderful job communicating that when one event happens, like this sort of event, that someone loses their child to police violence, that more than that is lost.
Yeah.
Really, a marital union is lost. The
Hmm.
ability to feel connected to your partner is lost. That there are so many other ripples that people are now grieving, that they're grieving obviously their son, but they are also now needing to grieve the connection they may have had together as a couple. They're grieving now their marriage as well. So the home just becomes really a location of endings and terminations, in ways that people may not expect.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up because like the location itself, this home was like such a big important role in the film itself. Because, you know, we had to like set dress it. Luckily, we found this really lived in space in Harlem where there's already family photos and like it seems like generations moved through this house. And that's exactly the kind of background I wanted for Shannon and Coleman. And, you know, as I was developing black backstories and then talking to the actors, I was like, really take in the space. Like I sent them photos before we shot. And then when we got on set, I was like, really move around this space and become familiar with it because this is where you started a family. This is where you guys maybe like fell in love. The house was passed down to Shannon, and I wanted them to really think about memories they created there. So like, you know, there's moments where we kind of get a glimpse of like the fun that they had, the music that they kind of like bonded over. Like music is such a big role. Like, you know, the end kind of has a really fun part. So I really wanted to establish that they loved each other and their bond was really strong, and that's what made their connection with their son really strong, and that's what makes it even more tragic is when once you like lose those things and the household falls apart. Yeah.
Before we take a break, I wanted to bring up another aspect of this article that I also thought was very telling for this film is that Anderson's actually is quoting Walsh and McGoldrick and says that each individual within the family will have a particular grief for the unique relationship with the lost family member. So the way that Shannon will potentially grieve because of her relationship with her son will look potentially different than how Coleman will grieve because of his relationship that he had with his son. And so sometimes that discrepancy between those relationships and now what the grief looks like also creates that fracture between each other that I also thought was very telling within your film.
Yeah, I think that's where a lot of my I obviously imagination had to work hard, but also research because I'm a 33-year-old guy that doesn't have kids, not married. So, you know, like I had to really dive into the shoes of both of them and figure out what their roles were, how they wanted to parent Jamal growing up, and kind of the activities they did with him, but also what kind of like moral lessons they were trying to pass down to him, or just pieces of advice. How about navigating the world as a young black man? And so I had to do some like reading, especially for being a mother. And I read this one book right here. It's called We Live for the We by Danny McClain. She's a reporter based in Cincinnati. She has wrote for Essence and other magazines, but she really explored from even before the baby comes out, like the pressure and the societal responsibility of being a Black mother. So I really had to like dive into her psyche the most because she's really the pulse of this film. And so I think a lot of that translated into how Lolita Foster, the actress that plays Shannon, interpreted that role and embodied that grief because it's very physical and it was very much about like what was going on inside, but what she wasn't saying. And so, yeah, I just really had to plant myself in their shoes and explore that.
Well, I'd like us to continue with A Cup of Tea because it is a wonderful film. And I know we also need to give our audience a break for one moment. So we will be back and we will continue to speak with Gabriel Noble regarding his short film, A Cup of Tea.
I didn't know it was possible to secure a fellowship at an Ivy League school, but UDC helped me achieve that. I never dreamed having this career was possible until UDC.
Find your possible. Visit udc.edu/possible to learn more.
I don't know why you're so sad. You've got a roof over your head.
Bro, you gotta stop with that depression stuff. That's a white people thing.
Escúchame, en esta casa los hombres no lloran.
You alright?
It just feels like it's coming from everywhere.
Do you want to talk about it?
Thanks for hearing me out, bro. Appreciate it.
You can talk to me if you're feeling sad. Whenever you need to talk, I'm here, okay?
Welcome back. Today we have the privilege of speaking with Gabriel Noble regarding his short film, A Cup of Tea, which has been making a large splash within film festivals. We were having an opportunity to speak offline a bit regarding how just the summer months has been a very busy time for you. So I'm so happy that we've had an opportunity to connect today.
Yes, it's the calm now after the storm.
Well, I can imagine after those storms of being at film festivals, talking about your film has actually been very nice storms to have.
Yes.
One of the things that I communicated earlier within our time today is that there was an article published in 2010 by Anderson, Common Grief, Complex Grieving, that was published in Pastoral Psychology. That I make mention to about another film, however, was very telling for this film as well. And one of the last things that I will note specifically about this prior to giving some recommendations later is that Anderson indicates too often women and men alike deny partners' pain and attempt to regulate how the other grieves. And this too, I thought was a very important aspect to your film of both Shannon and Coleman, the protagonists within your films, really try to, they have many feelings about how each other grieved the loss of their son.
Yeah, that's a great little quote there. Yeah, that was like the biggest kind of dichotomy and kind of conflict between them that I wanted to depict, especially whenever things get really heated at the coffee table. Because Shannon, like I said before, she had to play this role of being like that strong mother on stage and talking to the cameras. But at a certain point, she kind of, threw in the towel and like not necessarily threw in the towel, but wanted to retreat. And it was too much for her. She felt like she needed to have her own peace in her own home. And for Coleman, that was seen as like really giving up on the fight and giving up on, other Black families out there. And Obviously, that's not the case, but in the heat of the moment and through their own grieving processes, that's what came out. And that's kind of the conflict that exploded and really started the downward trajectory of their relationship. Um, and with Coleman, that also affected him, making him drink more, making him really want to live up to this father figure, but also this masculine figure of like leading the household, leading people out in the streets, and kind of becoming a civil rights figure. So I really needed to show that and show how his grief was being translated into more like action, even if it was self-destructive.
I had a thought while watching your film that I said I was not going to bring up in our conversation, but as you were talking, I just can't help it. It's because one of the things that I found really interesting about how they were grieving is that both of them grieved through having elixirs in their life, whether it's alcohol or tea. Both
Mm.
of those things, for each of them, were what they turned to be able to cope with the loss of their son. And I'm wondering if that was just coincidence, or had you given that thought that putting something into your body is the way that both of them found to soothe their pain?
Yeah. Um, in the writing of it 2 years ago, it was really like a subconscious thing for me. For me and what I've observed in the world, what I've observed through parent figures out in the world, when things get difficult, just anybody, like there has to be not really a fix, but something that they can do, something that will regulate their system a bit. Um, and I wanted to explore that, obviously with Coleman, it's through drinking, because he's like putting so much work, so much pressure on himself to be out there and leading people in the streets. So that he has to kind of wind down, like he's having trouble like winding down, cooling down because he's just so activated. He's enraged. And how do you calm those nerves? How do you calm that rage so that it doesn't manifest into something else that's bad and that will um, make you kind of check out of the movement? And with Shannon, I like her backstory is that she owns like an herb store that has tea and all this. And so that's kind of like how she gets grounded. That's how she's able to collect her thoughts and kind of disassociate from everything bad going on, because like in the beginning, she's drinking her tea and it's a special day and she's reflecting on everything. And the tea is like the one thing I think in her life that makes her, feel safe and makes her able to get her thoughts together. And it's a memory that she shared with her boy too. So I wanted to depict something that she's trying to really still experience with the thought of her boy.
That is was a very nice aspect of your film, is that you saw him alive drinking tea with his mother and what that may have meant for their relationship between each other, and the importance of tea in her life, and that they shared in that connection with each other. It was very lovely done. I want to just add one last thing from Anderson and then hear some of your thoughts about other things, which is Anderson noted that a family can aid in their grieving process by employing the following. So he gives some steps for families who are grieving that I think could be helpful for individuals to be able to think about in their process if they have lost a loved one and is really struggling with being able to connect and grieve together. Is one, acknowledging as a family the loss. Two, sharing the affective experience, your feelings and pain, in an effort to build a shared narrative or story and memory of the deceased. Three, reorganizing the family system, considering the loss experience. Really, again, acknowledging the fact that there's been a loss and reorganizing regarding how you want your family to look like and function in the future. And lastly, restoring meaning or faith into the family unit to foster the ability to be free to revive hope. Basically, allowing yourself to have permission to live again and to have happiness.
Wow.
I'm wondering, does this go with the end of your story?
Hmm. Yeah, it's funny you like broke it down, those steps, because I think the first parts that you mentioned, that's what they weren't able to be granted within themselves because they had to become these political media figures, like I said. So they kind of skipped over that, especially with Coleman. He had to jump out and get into action. That's how he wanted to grieve. But with Shannon, she was on the other spectrum. She wanted to do all the things that you just said, or maybe she didn't know how to at the time. And so what happened was that their marriage fell apart because of it. But the last one, yeah, I think that's exactly what I wanted to depict. The acceptance of what happened. And years have gone by since the murder, so I think enough time for both characters has passed to allow them to have the space to reflect and to really come to terms with it and to really try to start moving on. And I think it's just unfortunate that both of them, it took like 3 years for them to kind of come together and start doing that together. So I think it's beginning of another journey for them, like moving on, coming back together and realizing that they're both not at fault. Yeah.
What do you hope your film will offer audiences?
Some healing, yeah. Because it was a collective movement. It was a collective pain that we all felt in 2020 and beyond, that we still feel because it's still happening. So I wanted to raise awareness that this is still happening and change still needs to come, but also that we need to come together to heal and to recognize the pain that's been caused. And I think most importantly, the point of the movie is to not forget about the victims and not forget about the parents that were snatched of their child.
Who are also victims as well.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for your work. A Cup of Tea is just a beautiful film. It is shot beautifully. It's in a beautiful location. The home is gorgeous as well. And the actors are just very, they draw you in. They really do. And they draw you into their pain and also the potential of their happiness together. So it just is really a lovely film. Thank you for your work.
Thank you so much.